problems remain a constant challenge.
We are struggling with water and the roads have potholes.
We are going to stand together and fight for the rights of the people in our communities, because the leaders that we are voting for are not doing it. They are failing us. So if politics doesn't work, let the people on the ground do the work.
I mean, here where we are currently at Merrill School, I mean, it's a school with kids with health issues, etc. And you have sewage like this, which, in my opinion, is not against.
Yes, we are the voters of this country. Because the very same people, so-called leaders, they can't respond to us if ever.
It doesn't work because at the end, where would the tragedy be?
It's like we are animals outside. We don't belong anywhere. And Greenpoint is the oldest place in Kimberley, but today it looks like a dump site.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first part of our webinar series exploring the local government crisis. It's a series hosted by Vote Counts and Tshisimani Centre for Activists Education. The series takes place in the context of local government elections coming up in about a month from now, and following the release of the Auditor General report on municipal finances. And the report was very clear. It's a report that comes out every year, and every year it paints a very stark picture of a crisis. And this year it was particularly bad. Out of 257 municipalities in the country, it shows that only 27 received a clean audit. That's around 10%. Only 28% of municipalities were able to provide proper financial statements, and there was around 26 billion rand in irregular expenditure from municipalities. And to top all of this up, 27% of municipalities are net deep in debt, meaning they simply are unable to pay for basic services like water, electricity, and other infrastructure. But we all know too well that we don't even need the Auditor General report to illustrate this crisis. We know too well that there is a crisis. Our municipalities are characterized by poor service delivery. The government can't maintain infrastructure like sanitation and roads. There's very serious inefficiency and corruption. Many municipalities over the past few years were even taken to court. And every single day, communities are forced to take to the streets, protesting over water, electricity, roads, sanitation, housing, corruption, and tender processes. Yet we know that local government is supposed to be central to maintaining our democracy. It's supposed to be the sphere that we can hold government to account directly. To help us unpack this, in today's session is Phindile Kunene from Tshisimani Centre for Activists Education and Ayanda Kota from the Unemployed People's Movement. Welcome, comrades. Phindile, how serious is this crisis and how do you understand it?
The crisis is quite serious, Minaj, and if we are to, there are a number of signposts or markers of the crisis, right? So the municipal audit outcomes, which really tells us on a yearly basis how municipalities are using public monies, what they are spending on, do they get what they spend on, do they get value for money? If they say there's going to be a construction of a community hall, does that actually happen? And so on. So it tells us a story about how municipalities are actually using public funds, and it's sort of like an accountability mechanism for municipalities. But we don't really need that particular story to tell us there's a crisis, as you've said. It's a horrid story. It's really a horror show that is coming out of that particular report, which actually says that for 2019-2020, that's actually the worst audit outcome since the beginning of the term of office, which is quite serious. But it also says something that has been said by previous audits, which is that we are seeing a complete collapse of local government finances. And that's the real message. Now, as important as the municipal audit outcomes are, I myself find it very often too technical. The report is quite dense. If you are lucky, if it's less than 200 pages. This year was less than 200 pages, but it's also accompanied by a report on how municipalities have used COVID-19 funds. And even there's actually quite a horror show. So that's one story. But like I say, that's an incomplete story. There are other narratives that actually tell us that municipalities are in crisis. You've touched on how communities are responding all over the country. You can literally point on any place in South Africa today and talk to different people, and they will tell you that their municipalities are in crisis. Whether we're talking about Lekwa municipality, which has been referred to in the popular press, in the media, as the poster child for municipal failure, or whether you're looking at any municipality actually in the Northwest province, the picture is one of despair, disrepair, and a decline, whether of service standards, a decline in accountability, and so on. But there's also another development that I think is quite important for us as activists to sort of keep an eye on. And Ayanda will touch on this a little bit more. It's a development where we're seeing an increasing number of court cases being brought against municipalities by various groups in society. The first one, obviously, being social movements, residents groups, and it's interesting to look at the social composition of some of these residents group or residents associations, but we also see business, big business, with the example of Astral, which produces some of the frozen chickens that we see on our shelves in ShopRite and so on, which has taken the municipality to court, and that has actually resulted in the dissolution of council there. So we're seeing a number of court cases by social movements, by residents associations, by business, and I think that's important to underscore, complaining about the failure to provide water, the failure to maintain infrastructure, the failure to pay ESCOM, resulting in cut-offs or scheduled power interruptions, and so on. So there are quite a number of markers or signposts of the municipal crisis, depending on who you are talking to.
Thanks, Phindile. Ayanda, you've especially against the municipality there. How does this crisis translate on the ground? Ayanda?
Can you hear me, Minaj?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think very key and quite important. These municipalities, we must understand the crisis in that we are dealing with a product of a specific historical forces and a class struggle. It is for this reason that when we speak, we continue to speak about poor people's communities. That's number one. But number two, we must continue to locate the current crisis in the transition that we witnessed prior 1994. In that people who then occupied offices were largely motivated not by the transformation of this country, either by co-option and also by power. There are quite a number of examples that I can illustrate to make this point. One could be we understand the relationship between the Sol Kesna and some politicians of the ANC. Politicians were in the, also remember the ANC Youth League cozy relationship with the likes of Brett Kebbers. So I think it's quite important, instead of focusing largely on the transformation of this country, that now is catching up with us. That's despite that we are having beautiful pieces of legislation. I understand I'm breaking up. Minaj, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're fine now, and yeah, you can continue.
All right. Thank you. The point that I was making, I was gonna make an example about the IDP, Integrated Development Plan, which is quite a very community participation in planning and budget. That in Makanda, we have a budget, annual budget of just over 500 million rand. How are we going to spend that budget? How are we going to benefit from that budget? How are we going to make sure that our needs and aspirations are met? But what you get to see in these IDP meetings is that they are used as spaces to contain the anger and frustrations of our people. There is no seriousness and meaningful engagement between the people and the politicians. And also how they publicize these meetings, they don't take them serious. And also people, they have completely lost trust, even if you look at the attendance. So I think it is where the politician quite understand if they don't take the community, despite, I must say, Minaj, as I was saying this morning, despite that you are having your Municipal Systems Act of 2000, you are having your Constitution Chapter 7, the objectives of the local government, that all these pieces of legislation make one central point, the importance of community involvement in the running. That is absolutely not the case. But you get, what you get is completely opposite, is that the power of the people has been completely eroded by these politicians, completely eroded. There are quite a number of case studies and examples that I can bring to your attention. There are court cases. There was a court case also in PE where they were challenging that the municipality unilaterally took a decision to increase the tariff rates in Nelson Mandela Metro municipality. Citizens of that. So I'm saying those are some of the crises that people have been pushed to the margins. The politicians are running the show. It's all that I'm trying to say. The politicians are running the shows. The politicians are thieving. They don't care about the people. People have completely been pushed to the margins, that they don't have any say in the running of affairs of their municipalities.
Thanks, Ayanda. Ayanda gave us some good historical context and placed this failure in that context, in the context of the state of local government being co-opted by big business, in the context of deepening corruption, but also Ayanda said something very important. Local government was imagined to be the coal face of service delivery. Was imagined to be the sphere of government where there's very real consultation with people on the ground, with communities. But Ayanda also paints a very bleak picture and says this is absolutely not the case. Phindile, how did we get here? How did it go so wrong?
Thanks, Minaj. I don't know if I've got the answer, but what I can say is that they're competing. There are different explanations, and some of those explanations are competing explanations, right? And I must say that it's quite refreshing to hear Ayanda sort of historicizing some of the issues and the key questions. I keep on complaining that one of the things that I think has disappeared from the way we talk about local government and what's wrong with local government is this word neoliberalism. I hardly ever see it these days. But be that as it may, I mean, there are a number of explanations on the table because our local government system is basically the future of local government in South Africa is on the table. It's on the table in these elections, but it's also when you listen quite attentively, it's also on the table, whether we are discussing on radio shows, whether it's a community meeting or even what the party manifestos are saying. And what you find are different explanations and emphasis is put on different things. So there's quite, I don't know whether I should call it a dominant or the official explanation. And the official explanation that you find, for instance, in the municipal audit outcome, the report by the AG is that, well, there's an issue of skills as one issue. We have finance departments that are not skilled enough to prepare financial statements and to tell us how municipalities are making use of our money, basically. And therefore, the solution might be to basically capacitate, some form of capacity building would be necessary to resolve the issues. And then you've got in the same report and in the previous years, and when you look at what the National Treasury says, that municipalities are in this crisis because they are failing to make sure that those who owe actually do pay. So municipalities, what must they do? They must strengthen their credit control processes. They must strengthen their revenue collection processes. They must be trained to collect revenue, right? That's the easy solution. They owe ESCOM about 35 billion now, and many of those municipalities are in Free State, in the Northwest, in Mpumalanga, and some in Gauteng. So what do? We need to make sure that municipalities actually pay what they owe and they collect what they are owed. So that's basically, yeah, the explanation for how did we get here and what it will take to resolve the crisis. When you listen attentively to the National Treasury or to the Auditor General, who this year actually said that it will take some committed leadership to actually turn things around. That's what we need. But that's not the only explanation that we have in society. And I mean, Ayanda touched on the budget for his home municipality. There's quite a strong argument that is emerging now that says that, look, the Constitution and the 1998 White Paper on local government commits local government to all these lofty ideals about democracy, about participation, about economic development, and I mean, in short, developmental local government. And yet there's actually a mismatch between those commitments and what was imagined versus the money that is committed to making local government work. So there's quite there's an argument now, and the South African Local Government Association is actually championing it now quite strongly. They were not the first, or they're not the only ones who are saying this, but they are saying that local government is underfunded. And when you look at the responsibilities on its shoulders as a sphere of government, it's actually the responsibilities are huge. And yet, when you look at its share of national income, so how what is raised through taxes and other means is divided between among the three spheres of government, local government actually gets a pittance. That's what the argument says. It gets less than 10% of what is allocated. The EFF in its manifesto actually picks up on this issue and says, well, I mean, the problem is the financing of local government that has all these responsibilities, but no money to match it. And without any money to match it, local government, municipalities have no choice but to actually squeeze their consumers. And they squeeze their consumers by increasing property rates, increasing tariffs, and being quite stingy with giving free basic services and all of that. So there's that explanation that looks at the structure and what was imagined versus what prevails now in the crisis we are in. There are other explanations that point to the leakages, because a lot of people actually find it hard to believe. If you say local government is underfunded, then how come there's underspending every year? People ask. If you say local government is underfunded, then how come we lose billions in irregular expenditure or unauthorized expenditure, in theft, in loss of municipal property and municipal assets and so on and so forth? So there are people in society who find that difficult to believe and actually say the problem is we have people in power who are extremely corrupt. But not only that, they don't have the skills to occupy those offices. They are there on party tickets. So the explanations, Minaj, are actually quite varied, and each emphasizes a different thing altogether. They are not mutually exclusive. So you find that some people who say that local government is underfunded, they do concede that there's a lot of leakage and waste that happens in that sphere of government, and that needs to be controlled and to be strengthened. So obviously, I mean, how we diagnose the problem is important for us coming up with the solution. And the reason why I think it's also important to debate this question is that the mismanagement of municipalities, of the local sphere of government, and the ANC has basically presided over this crisis in most municipalities. What that means is that we can either have quite radical solutions actually entering the arena. For instance, we've got in a number of communities, people taking matters into their own hands, building their own roads and saying, we are going to patch potholes, we're going to do things ourselves. With the skills that we have, we're going to do things ourselves, we're going to build power, and we're going to contest what is an inept sphere of government or inept municipalities. But that, for me, is a double-edged sword, because at the same time, here's an example of AfriForum in the Free State, in Mangaung, committing to providing free removal of refuse and rubbish for a very small fee, something that municipality has been failing to do. But as we know, AfriForum is not committed to some of the principles that we committed to. So I have a big question about how the failure of local government or the collapse of local government has or is likely to embolden some of the right-wing forces in our society, and what we as activists can do to sort of wrestle with some of those dangers as we chart alternatives and as we think about alternatives.
Thanks, Phindile. We have a few questions. Two questions deal with issues of accountability and holding local government to account, or rather the lack of ability of communities to hold local government to account. Do we have sufficient accountability mechanisms? Phindile? Phindile, on mute.
Let me just take this question by Phindile Kunene, right? We have been in the situation and crisis for so many years. Why have we not seen any of these officials going to jail? So, I mean, I'm picking that question, Minaj, because I think it's absolutely important. And it's important for a number of reasons, right? There are people who say, I mean, to resolve the crisis, there must be accountability, there must be consequences. And that's a big message from the Auditor General with the 2019-2020 report. Phindile will be pleased to know that, I mean, we are starting, and it's what I believe, we are starting to see some consequences. For instance, the municipal manager of Madibeng municipality in the Northwest was actually given a jail sentence, which was suspended for his role in the collapse of that municipality and the municipality failing to meet some of its commitments. We can go back to that case or the articles around that case, which it happened on the 20th of May in 2020. A very interesting case that people look at and say, okay, this is actually the future of local government, because there the court actually decided to give the power to perform municipal functions to residents who had taken the municipality to court. But I'm interested in the social composition of those particular residents, as well as, the balance of power in a sense, and what that particular case tells us. So, I mean, I think we are starting to see some consequences, I'd like to believe, and certainly with the new powers, they're not so new anymore. But in 2019, the AG was given extra powers or teeth to basically bite. And with those new powers, I think we'll start seeing some consequences on how municipal monies, public monies are handled. But I think we need much, much more to actually see the consequences. And part of the response is obviously organizing. And perhaps even Ayanda can come in here on how, from their side, they've actually contested from below and contested politicians from below.
I want to bring Ayanda in on that note. Ayanda, you've had experience in both, in two accountability routes that communities have taken. One is the legal route, taking local government to account to court, and the second is organizing to contest power. Can you speak about that? Also in the context of local government accountability.
Thank you very much, Comrade Minaj. I think, to me, many communities will attest to this fact, that any attempts to hold the local politicians to account, the politician view or see these communities as a threat that must be vanquished. It is for this reason that you'll find many activists throughout the country are living their lives in fear. And those cases of fear and of whistleblowers, we continue to witness them, and they continue to this day. So the issue of holding these corrupt politicians to account, it's quite a battle. As I was saying, despite that you've got these laws that allows communities to be part of governance, that allows communities to hold these politicians to account. That's number one. But also, number two, Minaj, you would remember that after we won or the judgment of our dissolution case, we had collected about 22,000 signatures out of 23,000 people who voted in this municipality. In the evening of that day, the ANC convened an ANC meeting in Makanda, including the councillors. Before anyone could pronounce, the ANC in the region gave an instruction to the ANC members in our municipality and to councillors as well, to ANC councillors, that the ANC is going to appeal to challenge the court ruling. Now, that is shocking because the people of this city took a decision to challenge the governance, to go to the courts. But people outside this municipality, a cabal of the ANC who are seated somewhere, took a decision to challenge the court ruling. These municipalities are run by a cabal. In Makanda, there's a cabal that is sitting. There's a cabal that is sitting in the Kakadu offices. Clark was telling us in a Salga meeting that in Queenstown, in Okumgijima, there's a cabal that is sitting in King Dalingebo and taking decision how to run that municipality. And these are the cabals that are running dry these municipalities, that are milking dry these municipalities. So we've got to understand, the point that I'm trying to make, we've got to understand these issues are so structural that the rot has set in. So for us to change these municipalities, how they are run, it's gonna take a lot of sustained struggle, and by communities coming together and challenging the status quo. In Makanda, you have Makana Citizens Front. And Makana Citizens Front is a product of the shutdown, where people said, we are sick and tired of protesting, of shutdown. Now, we are giving you a mandate to go and register a civic movement that will then challenge the status quo, a civic movement that will contest elections. That's how Makana Citizens Front MC came about. And indeed, the Makana Citizens Front was registered, and it is now contesting the elections with no budget. As you might have seen, it was on social network, how one member was assaulted by ANC members. So what I'm trying to say, even contesting this municipality, we must not understand it. These communities, the independents, organizations like MCF must not understand this process as an end to the means, but we ought to understand this process as a means to end. It's part of saying we are taking these struggles to the council chambers. It's not a panacea to the problem, to these municipalities that are riddled with crisis. It cannot be seen as a panacea that no, all the problems will be solved, as Phindile was saying. But in terms of turning around, in terms of bringing back the agenda of transformation, in terms of transforming these municipalities, I think where I stand, and I think that's the position of UPM, it will take a lot of struggle, and those struggles must not be the UPM struggles that are taking place or happening in isolation of struggles that are taking place in this country. As we are struggling with this failure of municipalities. So we don't have a quick answer what must be done, but we quite understand how did we get here. The politicians have failed, the system has failed, and it continues to fail the Black working class communities. And it's no longer failing the Black working class communities, it's just failing now, literally everyone. You see people with money are going to court because they don't have water. So you've got a system that is failing literally everyone now. The roads are just affecting literally everyone. The collapse of infrastructure in these municipalities. So it's a serious crisis that there is no quick fix, Minaj.
Thanks, Ayanda. Phindi, Ayanda, I think brought something else that's very important onto the table. The fact that that politicians, and in particular political parties, hold an incredible amount of power, and therefore politicians, local government representatives in particular, accountable not to people, but to the cabals, and the cabals within the ANC, the cabals within the DA, etc. Therefore, part of the problem is deeply a political problem, which requires political solutions as well. And the solution that comrades in Makana have come up with is to contest power. Phindi, can you speak more about the kind of solutions that we can explore as activists, as communities?
Thanks, Minaj. I mean, I've been following the case of Makana municipality in Makanda quite closely. And I mean, I think I speak for most people but when I say that it's an inspiring case. I think there are many activists everywhere in the country who look at that case and they get inspired to actually wage a fight back. Even more so now that you've got residents who are saying, we live here, we know the conditions, we live with the rot and the filth of refuse not being collected, our streets being dirty, smelling the fumes on a daily basis, and we're going to do something about it, and by contesting power at a local level. So I mean, I think that's absolutely great, and it's fantastic. I do think though that I do anticipate that the problems will probably still remain. And I'm quite interested in hearing about how we then respond to this argument that says that the system is set up to fail, even if we can close the taps and make sure that there's no leaking or leakage, even if we can vote the corrupt out and ensure that even in terms of the bureaucrats who sit in offices, they are qualified and all of that. There'll still be this big problem that in terms of the fiscal framework, municipalities are expected, and this is basically wherever they are, whether it's a rural municipality, urban, poor with very few businesses, or a municipality in an urban area with lots of industries, they are expected to generate 73% own revenue. This idea of own revenue. So by charging through service charges, through license fees, through a whole range of things, service charges for water, electricity, property rates, and so on. It's a big amount. It's a big amount, and research by the Public Affairs Research Institute, Tracy Ledger and Mafatsi Rampedi, and Tracy will be part of the series. I mean, their research suggests that actually even the metros themselves are battling to actually live up to that expectation. And the reason why they're battling is because just under 40% of that revenue is supposed to come from water and electricity. But there are a whole range of reasons why some municipalities don't get electricity revenue directly, because about 50% of the consumers are supplied by Eskom directly. And so, I mean, this argument that the way the structure is set up is actually quite unfair to local government and has set what is a very important sphere of government for failure. I think we need to contend with that argument. I think we need to contend with that argument and point at its weaknesses and some of its strengths, because, and I think even more so given the cuts that have actually happened. Salga was very quick to actually say that due to COVID-19, municipalities are actually collecting less and less because industries were closed, businesses were closed, people lost jobs, so consumers can't pay. But over and above that, government departments actually owe municipalities billions, and there's no accountability for what they owe. And so Salga anticipates that this revenue crisis is still going to continue. There's no way that municipalities are going to actually meet those those expectations. And certainly when you look at what the AG says, when when we get the report that 53 of our municipalities are hanging in the balance, we don't know how they will continue, because they owe much more than they have in the bank. So what happens in those instances? So I think that's quite important to sort of look at and to contend with that argument. If it's got weaknesses, to basically say so. Like I said, there are some parties who are now taking up this particular argument. The EFF is clearly doing that from my reading of the manifesto. It's a very long manifesto, but from what I've read so far, I can see that argument is being tackled. And then the question around the politics and getting the politics out of councils. I mean, there is an argument now which was championed, I think, by SALGA and sections of SALGA. Certainly the former president, who is now the deputy minister of COPTA, was all over the radio talking about how the problem with municipalities is that a municipal manager, you've got a municipal manager who's supposed to account, but he plays actually probably a more senior role in the ANC structures sometimes, a much more senior role than the people he's supposed to be reporting to. And there are various examples like that. So this argument that the politics are actually tampering with delivery is something that is being taken up and being argued in certain quarters. I'm not sure if that's where we should be concentrating our energies. I think there's definitely something to that. But like I say, I mean, for us to actually get to the crux of the matter and to come up with the diagnosis, we have to look at all these different and competing explanations on the table, and then say where should we concentrate our efforts. I mean, there are people who believe that the failure of municipalities and the complete collapse is opening the room to actually organize outside of the state, or at least the local state. So when the Madibeng, the Khetleng River judgment came out, David Everett at Vets wrote a compelling article about how this is, the decision to give these functions to fix the sewer system, to provide water and so on and so forth to residents is actually some form of an anarchist nirvana. But then again, I come back to ask, but what is the social composition of that residents association? You've got employers there, you've got workers there, you've got, so what kind of politics is being made in this process of municipalities that are dysfunctional across the board? So I'm quite interested that as activists, we talk about all these options that are on the table, assess them for their merits and what they provide, but also be wary of some of their weaknesses and some of their challenges. And certainly contesting power through the ballot is one of the ways out of the crisis, but does the journey end there, or does it go beyond that? That's something I'm interested in. Thanks.
Thanks, Phindi. I'm going to bring in Henrietta from the Bonteheuwel Development Forum. She has a question. Henrietta, are you able to speak?
Yes, I am able to speak. Thank you, Minaj. With what Ayanda has been saying, as well as Sandy has been saying, in terms of what is it for us as activists and communities to do, and what is it that the Auditor's General Report is saying, and which lenses are we looking for solutions? So for me, the question is, so if the Auditor's General's report is saying that municipalities need to pay their debt, collect their debt, pay their debt, if our living realities are that we don't have jobs, we don't have money to spend and so forth, what is it that we as a community should be doing in terms of changing a local government that's working for us as a people and our needs? So what are the solutions that we need to look at through a lens such as that? So if we're talking about IDPs, we're talking about development, we're talking about poverty, inequality, and job creation. So should we be looking at the same model, which is literally a business model, or should we be looking at the model that is working for us as a people, helping us at the same time to develop ourselves, but rendering skills and services that is to the needs of our people and not to the politicians and the political parties that has captured municipalities in the way that they did by having tenders and jobs for friends and families and so forth. But we have found now that a number of communities are fixing the potholes themselves, are literally clearing their own drains, clearing before the rainy season, getting the leaves out and so forth and so on. So as communities for years now, we have been servicing our own needs because we have no faith in service delivery from the municipalities side. So sometimes I think that we are too set in looking for solutions within a system that is not working for us. If we, at the end of the day, if we have said we wanted the local government to be at the coal face where it must be working, and it's the most important form of government, and it should be delivering at risk, we should be practicing people's power. And now, after 27 years, we have people literally operating as mafias when it comes to delivering to the poor and keeping services and the corruption being there, that is immobilizing us as communities because we are so stuck within party politics, supporting personalities, forming part of certain groupings, but not speaking out and taking on the powers that may be. We need to take them on. We need to go and say, this system is not working with us. It's not working for us as a people. What is it that we need to keep on to? What is it that we need to throw out and change the system to work for us as a people? Because clearly, all the municipalities, most of them are failing us as a people. We are not being, there's not a change in our lives. The quality of our life is going down, and there's no sense of dignity in the things that our people are exposed to because of a lack of services, and sewage that's going down, potholes that's there, drains that our children are falling into, and so forth. So we need to seriously take our power back and rewrite whatever policies and systems and guidelines it is that's not working for us, rewrite it and put life, quality of life at the center of everything, and design our services and policies around and our structures around that. Thank you, Minaj. That's what I've wanted to contribute.
Thanks, Henrietta. And I'm also seeing a lot of comments and questions around this idea of building people's power, independent to power that's concentrated in political parties. I want to bring Kenneth in as well, who asked 2 questions in the chat box. Kenneth, are you a panelist? Joe, can you make Kenneth a panelist, please? Kenneth, can you speak to your question?
Hi, Minaj. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree with most of what the comrades have said, and very, very valuable contributions. But I just wondered, even to myself, why is it that we never question even the 2-tier system itself? Why is it that we have to have this separation, different governments running different? How can it not be direct at some point in which the community can play a bigger role in deciding some of these things? And then the second question, I think, for me is that while the auditor's report shows that there's a lack of accountability, municipalities are not running right and are corrupt. Yes, I think that should only be but one part to all of this. The bottom line, the financial part of it. There is also the part of participatory processes. Right now, we are having municipal elections coming up, but there's no IDPs. Where are the IDPs? We are not discussing any of the 5-year plans. So That was just my and the last comment, just a comment, is that I think Ayanda touched on it a little bit. I think not enough is said on SANCO as a demobilizing and a depoliticizing structure within communities, because SANCO was meant to be a watchdog for people on local government, but is now almost acting in the interest or against the interest of communities. That's it, Manoj.
Thanks, Kenneth and Henrietta. Ayanda, can you start to address those two comments and questions?
One is Sanko. What is another one, Minaj?
Kenneth asked two questions. One about Sanko, made a comment about Sanko, and the second one was what is the potential to change the two-tier electoral system in order to give communities more power?
Well, I think the point that I've made, we've got to organize, Minaj. There's no quick fix. We have put together a block left, a left block, to say all organization. I mean, Calclute is part. The former NUMSA Deputy General Secretary Brian Ashley of AIDC, Dominic Bryan, quite a number of people are part of that initiative. To say the communities that will be contesting these elections, we must not be narrow in doing so, because we must be able to learn from the past and use those experiences. And some of the experiences, some of our communities and independent candidates that were participating in the elections, there was no proper analysis of this institution as the neoliberal nature of this institution. So you had just comrades who were going there and promising our people. You had comrades who were going there and thinking that they can change. But that did not happen. You would remember there was a Mpumalanga party. There were quite a number of organizations. There was Stake Split Movement. There were quite a number of organizations that have done so. But the question is, what are we doing differently now? What we are doing differently now is to put this block, the left block, to say our comrades who will be participating in these elections, what are to do a proper political analysis to see what are the limitations. You would remember when Lenin, Bolsheviks said to participate in the elections. And one thing that Lenin said in those first elections, said, we are going to Duma to expose the limitations of Duma, right? He was never naive to say they will be going to Duma to bring people heaven and earth. These were Duma elections, if you would remember. So we are quite very clear that beyond, it's not just a narrow electoral program that we are engaging or embarking on. We are looking at these elections, but we are looking beyond election to say, can we have a very strong rooted movement beyond these local government elections? A movement that can draw some of the lesson, and a movement that could take some of the experience and be able to march forward. That's number one. But also, how do we offer support? What are the issues that we want to put into the manifesto? I mean, there are those kind of discussions. I think, to me, Comrade Minaj and comrades, it's important. It's important because I remember when I attended the Working Class Summit that gave rise to the SRWP, the Workers' Party, to participate. There was no room, but we were supposed to, there was no room for proper discussion and say, what does this election means to us as the left? To say, yes, we are participating, but what is the program beyond? As a result, there was a dismal failure. Though some of us were quite critical to say, let us not go. Let us build a movement very organically, right? Because our struggle does not have an expiry date. It's only election to say, if you don't register by this time, you'll not participate. But our struggle does not have an expiry date to say, if you don't do this by this, this will happen. So we're of the view that let us build a movement in a very organical way. Let us go back to our communities and emerge with a movement from below, a movement that can contemplate contesting these elections in the nearby future. But some comrades were saying, no, these are the elections we are going in a very narrow way. So I don't want us to be excited about this local government election and think taking a piece of paper and putting it in a ballot box will change the lives of our people if things go our way. It remains a piece of paper, despite our Right Reverend Bishop Desmond Tutu in 1994 jumped and said free at last, and our former statesman Nelson Mandela said, this piece of paper is important. Yes, it is important, but it does not, in itself, it cannot transform society. Because when you challenge these guys, right, when they want to vanquish us, like, people elected for us, therefore what is your problem, right? So I mean, election has become an alpha and omega in this country, everything. But what we are saying is that struggles are quite important, comrades. Struggles are quite important. We've got, if we want to let us think in the struggle, let us think with the struggles. Let us struggle within those communities. Let us think of the ways in which we can be able to change our society, in which we can be able to change these municipalities. Unfortunately, Comrade Minaj and comrades, life does not have a blueprint. There are no readily available answers for us. But I think if we struggle, if we forge unity, all this, as Comrade was saying, all these communities, we understand our analysis and diagnosis. Our analysis is quite correct. Then there is hope for us, right? Even MCF is not saying we will go into the council chamber, everything will be super. That will be incorrect. What about the neoliberal agenda of the ANC? That they will be squeezing your municipality. Your budget will be only about 500 million rand, which you've got a backlog on housing, you've got backlog on infrastructure, you've got backlog literally on everything. Even that 5 years will not be enough. So I'm saying there are those issues, Comrade Minaj. If I were just to throw some of these ideas and be political.
Thanks, Ayanda. Phindile, can you come in at last remarks, particularly addressing the comments by Henrietta and Kenneth? And I also see there's a last question in the Q&A box. Maybe you can also address that. Why are ward committees so ineffective?
Okay, all right. Thanks, Minaj. I mean, there are a few questions that I think we've sort of missed coming at us directly. So I'm just going to pick up on some of those questions, if that's okay. There's a question: what is the role of bureaucrats, technocrats, and unions in this malaise? And it comes from Ron Harris, the ACDP. I think that's an interesting question. One of the things that I do every time the municipal audit comes out, or every time there's a discussion on bargaining and salaries at a municipal level, is to actually look at what our unions, the municipal workers' unions, are actually saying about the municipal crisis. And I must say that, I mean, this year it's actually quite disappointing that you read almost everything around the wage demands of municipal workers and all of that, but there's very little about how a dysfunctional municipality also translates into a dysfunctional workplace for most workers across the country. So I'm interested in hearing the voices of municipal workers and how they're contending with the crisis. And I think your question is important. Yeah, I think that's a very, very important question. The other question we sort of missed is the late AG Kimi Makwe to raise the need to address the lack of planning discipline, which exposes municipal administrations to abuse and the need for preventative controls. How much of this is part of what is on the table regarding the future of municipalities? Will this not help dilute the unbridled power of politicians that Ayanda spoke about? I mean, Mandisi, thanks for the question. I think that's a very good question. The line that sort of the key message from the AG reports is exactly that we need more controls. I mean, the last report before this one was about how there isn't much to go around. So there is a crisis financially, but we don't have enough good hands at the till. That message is repeated this year again. And I must just say, in terms of the new powers of the AG, as of 2019, the AG can refer some issues to the public protector, to the special investigative unit, or even to the SAPS for investigation, where they pick up issues that need to be flagged. But they can also, I mean, municipal managers can also be held directly accountable for some of these failures. So, I mean, there are more powers that are going to strengthen accountability. And certainly from this report, there were 96 material irregularities issued with some instructions that need to be followed and so on. So, I mean, we're seeing some shift, but because that report tells an incomplete story, it tells a story of how public monies are being used. And that's not the only crisis. So we can't all place our eggs in that particular basket. That's just in terms of those questions. I mean, I think Henrietta raises quite important issues and puts some important issues on the table, right? And this question about servicing our own needs or doing it ourselves is quite important. And this question of building beyond official structures, right? It's an interesting development that we're seeing in different places, different parts of South Africa. It would be interesting to actually bring activists together in one space for some cross-learning to happen, to look at some of the patterns that we are seeing, but to also ask the question, what do we gain? It's quite clear what we're gaining, right, in building power and being self-reliant and challenging the power of local government. But to also look at what are some of the dangers and what do we lose? Are we absolving local government from performing its own, its function? Are we absolving national government and provincial government and letting them off the hook for how national revenue is being distributed and so on and so on? So we need to talk about these questions, which are really, I think, questions of strategy. And lots of people have raised similar issues like Comrade Kokoma in the Free State and so on, but I won't touch much on that. I think I will emphasize the point that I opened with, that the future of local government is on the table. The debate is raging about how to save local government. I think as activists, we must engage with these perspectives, a plurality of perspectives, look at their merits and also look at their demerits, what they offer and what they also miss out, or some of their limitations, and then move from that point. These elections are very important because the crisis is the backdrop of these elections. It doesn't stop now, but I think everyone now is aware that local government is on the brink of a precipice. But the debate shouldn't stop with the elections, as Ayanda was saying. It goes on beyond the elections. Thanks.
Thanks, Phindi. And also just to say that this is just the first part of this series that will explore more deeply the crisis and, more importantly, the different perspectives and allow us to engage and debate those perspectives. On Thursday in particular, we're going to discuss perspectives from communities and from others on how to address this crisis, especially in the context of local government elections coming up, very, very important and crucial elections this year. And a lot of the comments and questions that are in the chat box will be addressed on Thursday. Thursday's session is going to be about community responses to municipal crisis, and what can be done in the future. So we'll pick up a lot of what was discussed now. We've run out of time, but I think the discussion has been rich, has been very useful. We got two really good perspectives and some perspectives from people on the floor, and we'll continue this discussion on Thursday in 2 days' time. We'll send that information out immediately after this meeting and tomorrow again. Thanks, Phindile. Thanks, Ayanda, for contributing to this discussion. I think it's been really good.
Viva.